Folks, we are live on a Saturday, and I am your host, Dash V. With me today, I have
Me, Lizzy Hedgehog, with my cute little Sonic sweetie. And today we have a really awesome guest who he and I have something pretty cool in common, which he will talk about later. Dragon Ball Z, Z, the founder of Serenity Forge.
Hey, yeah, thank you guys for having me.
pleasure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What does it mean to be founder of Serenity Forge?
What it really means is you started a team, right? I think to go into a little bit about just how the team got started, it's actually a pretty funny story. I was a high school student at the time in Colorado, and Colorado is a pretty small state when it comes to game development. So I applied to be an intern at pretty much every company, which is two at the time, and I heard back from one of them and never heard back from the other. And the one that replied was literally, dude, I'm a kid in my mom's basement. I'm not a company. You can't intern with me. So okay, well, I guess I'm just going to have to start my own team. So that's how the company got started.
Wow, that's excellent.
Yeah.
That's pretty excellent. And you've got a couple games in the pipeline too, right? Tell us a bit about some of those games.
Yeah. So Serenity Forge has been around since pretty much, I would say 2010, 2012 is when we first started making games more seriously. We all graduated from college around 2013, 2014. So I graduated from college in 2014 and started working on games since then full time. Right now, we're 8 full-time developers located in Boulder, and it's been going pretty well. This year we have 4 games coming out. The most recent upcoming release is a game called Mystic Melee, which is kind of like a game inspired a lot by Dust Force and also Duck Game, if you ever heard of those two. Yeah. And then on top of that, we also have a few more games. One we recently kind of sneak peeked at called Coma Remembered. Which you can find on it's just an image on our site right now. And the 2 other ones that are a little bit more vocal, we're more vocal about. One is called Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. So Where the Water Tastes Like Wine is a game led by Jonaman Nordhagen, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. He is one of the creators behind a game called Gone Home, which is a game that was dealing a lot with social issues at the time. And so his new game, we're working with him together to create it's all about the Dust Bowl, Americana kind of feel. You play as essentially a hobo during the Dust Bowl era, and suffer through a really difficult time period where you can't find food and you get beaten by people. And really all you really have to live for is to talk with others, meet people on the streets, share your stories with one another, and eventually die, because that's what happens to all the people back then.
Have you played or seen or read about This War of Mine?
Yeah, I've played that game.
How would you compare this is Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, right?
Mm-hmm.
How would you compare that to This War of Mine? Is it kind of similar in feel, or is it different? And if so, how? I guess I'm trying to get a feel for what genre, Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, what would you consider that to be?
The genre is actually very much intended to be experimental. So so the way that Jonaman described to me when we first started talking about the game is that he told me, imagine Gone Home, or imagine a first-person shooter game but without the shooting. And that's what Gone Home came out of, right? Okay. Now imagine Final Fantasy VII, but without the Japanese RPG. So that's what this game is going to play like. So imagine instead of, how like in Final Fantasy Overworld, you walk around and you go into combat, you talk to people, etc., right? But now imagine instead of the combat, you just go into sequences where you meet people and you share stories with one another. You learn from their experience, they learn from your experience, and you go your separate ways afterwards.
So it's more like an interactive story.
Absolutely, but it's not one unique story. So I believe he just released the group of writers on the game. I think it's 12 or 14 something very industry famous writers, people who worked on Watch Dogs, people who worked, who work at Kotaku, etc.
Hmm.
All these writers, they write their own stories, their own micro stories and dialogue, and all of it gets put into the game. So
Oh
it kind of
wow.
feels like a really living, breathing kind of world filled with just content and people that you can interact with.
That's cool. So you guys have a lot of projects in the works. How big is the team at Serenity Forge?
Oh, we're 8 people. So yeah, we're not super big, but mostly developers.
Oh, that's definitely respectable. Tell me a little bit about the challenge of working on multiple projects with a team of 8.
Yeah, so I mean, the challenge is that no one, I mean, no one does this for a reason, right? The challenge is that you're always gonna have to juggle multiple different things at the same time. It's a good thing and a bad. To me, it's always been a good thing. For our company culture, it's always been a good thing. Because it's more fun, right? Like imagine if you have to do the same thing every day for a year, 2 years straight, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what AAA game devs usually have to do. I mean, I met a friend recently, and he was talking about how his time at EA, he was working on NBA 20 something. I don't know. I don't play those games much, but so like what he's an animator, and he told me that his job was literally like move people's facial expressions while they're playing basketball. And he did that 2 years straight. Like he would
Oh
wake up in the
wow.
morning, go to the office, modify their facial expressions, go home, and just repeat that for 2 years straight. And he got so burnt out because of it. For someone like a smaller team like ours, and that work on so many different projects, you can jump on one game for one thing. You can jump on another game for another thing. Like you can be a game designer for one game. You can be an
Hmm.
artist for the second game. Maybe you can do some, QA for the third game that we're working on. It keeps it fresh.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I know that as somebody that runs, projects and stuff where I work, keeping it fresh is definitely, it's always a challenge, but it's a total necessity because you don't want folks burned out. Not only does it impact, them, right, and their longevity with the company or their engagement in the product, but I think after a certain period of time, expertise can kind of turn into it's like a double-edged sword. Like, yes, okay, you're an expert in making those facial expressions and you've done it a million times, but because you've done it a million times, nothing really feels fresh anymore. Nothing
Yeah.
really feels, you kind of feel like you're tapped out, where sometimes if you had an opportunity as creatively to kind of create something that you think is good, let it bake for a little while, go do something else, like you said, maybe do some QA, maybe do some unrelated artwork or write some story or something like that, and then you come back to it a week later, you go, oh, wait, I have a way to make that expression better. There should be a wink after the smirk or something like that. The old kind of becomes new again because you've been able to let it go and then come back, which you don't get if you just keep hitting it repeatedly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially for an industry that is so, I mean, creativity is so necessary for this industry. If you get burnt out, if you lose passion for what you do, you're not going to get creative. You can't think outside the box, and, coding even becomes so difficult that you can't, really figure out how you can tackle some of the bugs out there. So I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Lizzy, you alluded a little bit before about you and Z having some stuff in common. Do you wanna follow up with some questions or?
Well, yeah. Z, is it okay if you share your story? Because I know that's how I found you actually. Because I read your story and it caught my attention. Like, wow, I know exactly how he feels because I've been there. So, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the shorter, more condensed version of the story is that when I was 18 years old, I was diagnosed with a severe and chronic blood disorder that essentially, I almost died. I was on my deathbed when I was 18.
Wow.
And so doctors never ended up finding out what the issue was with my body or what caused it, I guess. The I guess in appearance forms from the outside, it just looks like I keep on bleeding no matter what I do. So I was hospitalized for 2 years between the ages of 18 to 20. And during this time, it was a really difficult time for me. Especially as a kind of a nerdy gamer growing up, I didn't do super well in school either. It was tough, right? Like I didn't have friends that ever visited me. I just kind of stayed in my own hospital room by myself. My parents would, check up on me. I mean, that's about it. When that happened, I couldn't really turn to anyone. I didn't have anyone there to support me. But instead, what I did find support in is video games. I started playing all sorts of different games, single player games like Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Braid, Portal, all these amazing single player games at the time. And then I started playing a bunch of multiplayer games, games like League of Legends, World of Warcraft, all these MMORPGs and these online online things where
Mhm.
I got connected with all sorts of different people online. People that I later became really close friends of mine and would check up with me and make sure that I've been doing okay. And more important, also very importantly, through these single player games like Final Fantasy. These games taught me to become a hero, right? Like they taught me that I am in control of my life. I can go out there and slay demons and kill Sephiroth, although I did never actually beat him. But anyway, but like like you get the point. These games made me feel really good about myself when nothing else in the world really made me feel that way. So because of games, I was able to go through those 2 years while going through chemotherapy and all of that. And eventually I started recovering. By the age of 21, I was able to finally go back to school. And I eventually, I was studying finance at the time, but going through school and meeting all these new friends of mine at that time, I would look back to my older self or younger self, I guess, and think back and be like, well, these games that I played, games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, they were not made to help me, but they ended up saving my life. What if we begin making video games that have the intention of saving other people's lives? Like, what kind of power can we unlock? And that's why I really started Serenity Forge at that time to push the video game medium forward.
That's
That's
great.
awesome.
I'm glad that you went there because I was going to ask you, and you already answered it in part, but maybe you could get a little bit more detailed. The question that I'd wanted to ask you that you started to answer already is, did your brush with mortality impact or create any drivers for you as you embark on creating your own studio, making your own games? Does it influence the projects that you work on, and if so, in what way?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I would like to say that I feel lucky to have gone through everything. I feel like I lucked. Not only to have I lucked out, and I almost feel like, haha, you guys didn't get to have this experience kind of thing sometimes. Or it's like, wow, like I almost died at one point and I didn't, right? Like that's an
Yeah.
amazing experience. And now because of it, I cherish life a lot more than I would have otherwise. And I guess the byproduct of that is I live every day as a gift, and I always think about what am I doing this day or what am I doing with my life that is driving value for society? How can I give back? So whenever we make games, we always I use the term value-driven game development, which is basically whenever you start a project, whenever you think about any game design decision, always approach it from the standpoint that what are you doing to society by making this decision, right? If you make a game that the value is that you want to make a lot of money, right? Then you can make something like Candy Crush. If your value is I want a ton of people to play my game, then you can do something like League of Legends, right?
Yeah.
But what if something like, hey, I want people to feel self-worth, or I want people to understand more about history or appreciate the value of learning. All these things become true values that are not just for the self, but for others in society. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of vaguely how I would say it really impacted how I, do approach daily life.
It's wonderful.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Lizzie, did you have any follow-up questions?
Oh no, I mean, I'm just enjoying everything that I'm hearing right now.
Same here. I think Lizzie might already know this, but actually all three of us have the whole like nearly dying and every day being a gift thing in common. Lizzie, which you've shared your story before, is a brain tumor survivor, which we're all very grateful for and thankful for. Also, she mentioned before, I'll post a link to it down in the doodly doo. People can go back to the prior episode where she talked about her story, talked about what she went through and how video games, specifically Sega and Sonic, helped her kind of work through, that hard period in her life. I was a gamer even before my experience, so I can't. Um, Although I'm sure the games help, I never really thought about it in that way. It's my gaming didn't really increase or decrease as a result of it, but definitely things that you said hit home, like realizing that every day is a gift, realizing that just because you're young doesn't mean that you're invincible, and understanding early that you got one shot at this life, and if you just make it about you and what you can do with it, it's going to be a different kind of life than if you realize, everyone that's around you. Um, I think a lot of times, we tend to think about, oh, well, when I'm gone, right? We don't necessarily think about the whole like, well, when I'm gone, my impact, my influence, my ability to affect people's lives in any way, be it good or bad, is gone. And so if what I want to do is really accomplish something, I can accomplish something that's erased when I'm erased, or I can accomplish something that kind of lives beyond me and lives beyond,
Hmm.
what I did for myself. And so, in my case, I had a birth defect in my lungs that did not manifest itself in a dangerous way until I was about 18, 19.
Hmm.
So man, our teen years were brutal on us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I spent a couple weeks twice. I spent a couple weeks in the hospital with reconstructive surgery where they literally like rebuilt my lungs and my respiratory system, piece by piece in some cases. And then it reset college plans, it reset job plans, um, personal goals and ambitions. And I'm with you. Uh, Kind of a blessing. There's a lot of life decisions I made that I think were good, strong life decisions that I made because I knew that I had to get it right, and not in a like super stress yourself out about it standpoint, but just it was easy for me to choose not to go drinking and to focus more on my studies. It was easy for me to choose to study something that would give me a career path that would allow me to sustain the lifestyle that I wanted to have, but also have the income to pursue additional goals that would have been nothing more than just lofty goals if I didn't really take it seriously and say, well, you can't make films, you can't have a show, you can't do this stuff if you're still trying to figure out how are you going to eat. So and doing the stuff that you want to do, right? Filming the show. This does
Yeah.
not pay for my mortgage. This does not buy my games,
Yeah.
right? If somebody wants to see the ad revenues, right, like they can see it, right? I think, oh, I have it right here, right? Like, here's what we made last year on the show, right? So, Lizzie, I'll
Yeah.
split it with you,
All right.
right? Don't spend it all in one place. But at the same time, it's choices that I made 10 years ago, 15 years ago that enable me to do the show. And part of doing the show is lots of people are doing shows about video games and stuff. But we kind of want to do like you, like we want to kind of tell the stories that kind of touch the heartstrings. We want to focus on the positives in the industry, where it's headed, where it could go. We definitely want to call out when things don't quite meet our level of expectation because we think that companies and developers need to know that too.
Hmm.
But we don't want that to be the main drive. We could get a lot more views. Like you said, if our goal was views, all I have to do is swear a lot more and insult people, and we'll get lots of views just
I can take my
because.
shirt off and we'll get tons of views.
Oh, exactly, right? But the kind of show that we want to have is we want to have a show where, even if it's only 10 people watching, we want the 10 people watching it to kind of feel touched in some way. And I think our interview with you has hopefully done that for some people that can relate. I think our interview with Tom, Lizzie, you remember that.
Oh, yes.
I have yet to see another interview with him where he's actually cried. And we asked him a very simple question. You remember the question we asked him, Lizzie? It
Um,
was your question,
yeah, because I mentioned my brain tumor story, and then he was talking about the AIDS Foundation he was supporting.
Hmm.
which was a story I'd never heard. I didn't even know about this. I never knew that Sega had sponsored an event for the AIDS Foundation during that time when nobody wanted to talk about AIDS. Nobody even wanted to acknowledge its existence. And, let alone that he was like, this is something we're going to do. We have to do this. And that it hit so close to home. That was a project that he launched that actually, helped, one of his neighbors. And it was just great because I think, a lot of people have seen Tom talk before. They kind of know who he is if they're into Sega and retro gaming. and they've got their opinions, this, that, and whatever, based on 32X, based on Sega CD. What was great was to actually have him on the show and to be able to offer a venue where people could see him as a person and actually, see that he's somebody that has passions, that has, hurts sometimes. And it just gives you this whole new dimension where you're like, wow, that guy was driving Sega. And it just gives you a completely different picture of the company at the time, of like you said, the culture, which I think is very important. A lot of people think that making good products is just having, really smart and really talented people. I've worked with smart and talented people that I never want to work with again.
Yeah.
And I've worked with smart and talented people that no one knows their name because they're just that humble and they're just that fantastic. And so I think culture really is king. To work with people that want the same thing, and want kind of a nobler thing than just finish the product, make lots of money, I think is really, really great. So I'm looking forward to a bunch of these games that you've mentioned. Do you have a favorite of the games that you're working on?
I mean, first of all, thank you so much, for that insight, and also, that you're looking forward to the games. That's always good to hear. But I mean, you can't pick favorites, right? I mean, all of these games are like your little babies. Like you can think back and think about all the projects that you work on. You realize the older projects may not be the best looking projects, but they still carry a very important place in your heart. The newer projects, although very exciting, not necessarily something that you're very proud of even. So a lot of these things is really hard to say. I am very excited to finally release the King's Bird later this year. The King's Bird is something that we've been working on for 2+ years at this point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the whole game has just gone through so many different transformations, and we're finally debuting the game's kind of like the final look of the game at GDC next week. So the idea of the King's Bird is that we wanted to create a game that is very precision based, however, for a much larger audience. So games like Dust Force, it's way too precise and not really user friendly. Like people have trouble getting into that game, or something like a casual gamer or something like that would look at it and be like, that's not a game for me, right? We just it's amazing. We love Dust Force and we play it all the time, but we wish that more people could enjoy those types of experiences.
Yeah.
So we created the King's Bird. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna ask, where can we find those games?
So the King's Bird, which one? The King's Bird or Dust Force? Just curious.
Yeah, both of them.
Okay, so the King's Bird is you can find it on our website, so serenityforge.com/game/the King's Bird, I believe, or thekingsbird.com. Actually, I think that's also
What I think what Lizzy's getting at. What target platforms do you currently have planned? Are these PC only releases, or are you looking at consoles as well?
we have not announced that just yet. So
Okay.
yeah, that's we're still waiting on confirmations on that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I can't say much more beyond that.
All
Anyways, yeah. So so the game very much focused on bringing in a new audience. And additionally, we also have a kind of like an emotionally driven story behind the game. It's going to be a very minimal story, but the whole point of the story is that we wanted to challenge the duality between freedom and order. So you play as a girl character. Her name is Quill, and she is trapped in a kingdom ruled by a tyrant king. And eventually she finds a way to finally escape this kingdom to go outside and explore the world. And after she does that, she realizes that there's something wrong with the world, and that everyone is gone, and that there's actually a reason for why that king created that kingdom. However, unfortunately, through that process, she destroyed the barrier to try to free the people from the kingdom, and then there were severe consequences because of it. Anyway, so the whole point of the story again is the duality between order, chaos, freedom, and tyranny. It's just a story and mass appeal, kind of a precision platformer, momentum platformer game.
Oh,
Very
wow.
interesting. What games have inspired the games that you're creating?
The a really good thing about our team is that all of us have pretty diverse tastes in video games. You know, like someone like me, I played a ton of League of Legends, but not necessarily draw inspiration from them. Um, Games like Journey, I think, is a huge inspiration. Shadow of the Colossus, I think generally always inspire some of the games
When
that
you
we work on.
mentioned minimalistic story, Shadow of the Colossus, or when you mentioned minimalist presentation, but emphasis on story, Shadow of the Colossus was exactly what sprang to mind.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's a good one. And on top of that, I mean, a lot of the PlayStation games. I mean, I can name off a ton of different games, but for me personally, I really enjoy some of the older games that really told, I don't know, more of a meaningful history to a lot of the games that you like that you play. A lot of these games were like Japan only or China only games, games that RPGs that would really build character, build history, and teach you a little bit while you're playing. So that way, like for example, Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, when you play the game, you learn a lot about American history and what it felt like living in America back in 1920s or 1930s. That kind of experience you can't really get anywhere else besides maybe reading The Great Gatsby or something like that, or not, yeah, or like Grapes of Wrath, I guess, more closely. So
Yeah. I'm really loving the more that I'm playing like this latest console generation. I don't think the wow factor's really been there with the graphics and everything the way that people were kind of expecting. It wasn't quite the. We're now getting into that uncanny period where just jumping from 1080p to 4K or halfway in between, right? As some of these systems are really just 2.5K. The if you're sitting 13 14 feet back on the couch, you're not really telling that there's just slightly less jaggies, right, and that kind of thing. Um, and the consoles, I don't think, are really powerful enough yet to really harness the higher resolutions. But what has been impressing me is that the ability of we're beyond now the point where the motion sensing of the 6-axis controller is a gimmick. We're past the point where the camera and the move controls are a gimmick, and we're really, I think, now finally getting to that area where there's enough capability in the system and in the peripherals that are able to be joined with it to where you could tell some interesting stories. One of which, games like Brothers. I don't know if you've played that one. Games like Life is Strange. They do really interesting things with the controls or with the feedback mechanism of the controls to actually put you in the moment. So even if you're while you're playing the game, it feels they're doing a really good job now of putting you in the 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 body, I guess, of the main character and really feeling what they're feeling. Whether it's the thud of a controller, shaking as you softly hear a gunshot in the background, or whether it's feedback as like you're pushing on an object and the object pushes back, that kind of thing. I'm just really excited that developers are thinking outside of the box beyond the controller just being a tool to move an avatar on the screen. They're really thinking about not just how does the person interact with the game, but how does the game interact with the person to evoke a either mental or emotional response or reaction. And so I've had games that just out of nowhere, kind of just reached in and got me in the feels, and I was like, wow, I was not expecting that, right? I was not expecting to just be playing this game and then be crying. When I was a kid, I'd cry just if the game had a touching story, and now I can cry because the story certainly is still being expertly told, but the means to tell it is just becoming so much better and so much more powerful with the evolution of consoles and everything. Do you guys consider that the ability for the controls or for the ability of the game to interact with the player as you develop? Can you give us any teasers as to that or?
yeah, I mean, just to comment on the general concept, I think I would categorize the concept into a term that I used to call or typically call video game literacy. So this is actually a huge topic for just for video games evolving to the future overall. So video game literacy is a huge problem, I think, in our society. And recent studies show that like 42% of all Americans play video games every day, and that's a ton. That's a ton
Yeah.
of people, right? But at the same time, like you still see video games as this like boys club or something like that that people just don't really care much about. And I think a large part of it is due to this, what you just described. So like think back when the Wii first came out, or like when the Wii U came out, or like even when mobile games first came out, people had a lot of trouble like figuring out how to make games for these systems. Even until now, like I don't think people really fully understood how to make games for the Wii. Um, like
Yeah, no, I
like
would agree with that wholeheartedly. Yeah.
yeah, like every good game on the Wii was a first party game, pretty much. Like, I mean, you can say Resident Evil 4 was pretty good on the Wii, but I
Yeah.
mean, there's really just a few titles, and everything else
Yeah.
is either trying to, use old controls on a Wiimote, right?
Yeah.
Or they're just, trying to cash in on some, shovelware title.
Yeah,
And
I think a notable exception to that is Trauma Center, but
oh
you're
yeah,
right. I mean, I
yeah.
can't beyond that. I'm having a hard time thinking of non-first party titles that really use the controls in a meaningful way that added value.
Right, and you can also say the same thing about the Wii U. I mean, I remember when Zombies U first was announced, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's really clever. You use the map on your screen, and that's pretty much it. I use the
Yeah.
map on the screen
Oh yeah.
for every game since then. So and then like think back to like early PS3 era as well.
Yeah.
Like during the PS2, like Resident Evil 4 first came out. I mean, I don't know why I'm talking about it. But like God of War is also pretty huge on PS2.
Yeah.
Had these quick time events that people started inventing, like putting into every game out there. Um, and then like PS3 came out, and I remember the first time I played Heavy Rain, I was like, oh, hey, it's a quick time event, but you don't actually, it's not like actually like you're just ripping someone's head off and feeling super powerful. You're pressing X to Jason, right? I mean, I remember that was a huge thing. And that for some reason like felt very unique, right? That walking simulator
Yeah.
feel to everything. Dear Esther is another good example of something that just like really out of the norm
Yeah.
became mainstream nowadays. Dear Esther was shat on so hard when it first came out. Everyone said it was pretentious. It's not a real game. You just walk around. People made fun of it, calling it a walking simulator and all that. But just look at all the amazing narratives of games that we have nowadays that came from that experience, right?
Yeah.
Gone Home is a game that I talk about all the time. I just love that game. And then like you look at all the modern, like, I mean, you mentioned Life is Strange, which is definitely like, took a lot of inspiration from older walking simulator games like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, in terms of what we do, we have to work with the controls that are given to us. We're game developers. We're not,
Yeah.
hardware engineers. But at the same time, based on the controls that you use, you have different game types. It's never, I don't know. I guess for us, we don't have too much liberty in designing for the controls or designing the controls themselves, but more so designing for the controls. We design what the engineers give us. It's kind of like we're dealt a hand of cards, and we have to think about how we can play those cards. And that's
Yeah.
that's as far as the kind of liberty that we can have.
Okay. I think within that, what's interesting is I think there's enough, whether it's Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PC. I think what's interesting is that I know that in the last year, 2016, a lot of people were expecting VR was going to be this amazing thing. And I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm just saying like for me it'll be an amazing thing when it's not like an additional $600 on top of whatever it is that you bought to actually play your game.
Right.
So I think did they learn nothing from the 3DO, right? Like or from the PlayStation 3's initial launch? If you release something that costs $600 to $700 to play a game, expect adoption to be lower than if you release something that costs $300 and it comes with everything that you need. I think right now, if you look at the Switch, I've referred to it before as basically the Wii U 2.0, Wii U Part 2. But people are super excited about it because everything that you need, it's a console that releases with a bunch of potential, and it's really just like you said, the devs that decide to adopt the Switch platform, do they decide to really embrace the controls and come up with new, unique, and innovative experiences where the interaction between the game and the player is two-way? Or are they going to try to like retrofit and rehash old stuff with a now you waggle the remote to swing the sword? That kind of thing. But I think that the situation is improving. Like one of the things that I kind of thought, and maybe this gets into the literacy that you're talking about. I remember reading when the Tomb Raider reboot, they were given the different target platforms, and one of them they said we're not targeting the Wii U because it's underpowered and we don't really know. We can't think of any really good ways to use the controls.
Mhm.
For me, one of the most, so I ended up getting the game on the PlayStation 3 and it was fantastic, right? But I guess for me as an engineer, I'm looking at the hardware of the Wii U versus the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, and it's about on par. So that didn't really seem to be, the hardware argument really didn't seem to hold up. And then the other problem was that a major game mechanic of the Tomb Raider reboot was her constantly using this PDA and using this map to jump to different locations, to see where different items are. And what was really annoying to me was that the map is really like, if you're trying to play the game to like 100% completion, you need to be joined to the hip with the map. And so for me, like, it was very frustrating to have to jump out of the game world and jump out of that reality to go to a map on the screen when I'm like, if this was the Wii U, it would be very natural and intuitive to me that the screen part of the Wii U is her PDA.
Mhm.
And all of that is right there. And so instead of me being a person that's playing the character Laura Croft, the difference would be me feeling like I am that character, right? A couple differences, but for the most part, me being that character in that moment, in that environment, and just like that character occasionally needs to check the digital device. And so for me, it was kind of like a how do they not see, like, to me it's like a natural fit, right? Like you made the game so dependent on this mechanic, and then you have a device that would make it so that the mechanic is seamless with the actual gameplay, but then you skip that one platform because maybe the development would have taken a couple extra months for the controls.
Right.
So I'm hopeful, like you said, that the literacy definitely increases, and that they see another place where I thought kind of the ball got dropped was I loved Resident Evil 4 for the Wii. I thought that the remake was, the controls were absolutely excellent. And then when Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition came out for the PlayStation 3, I didn't get Resident Evil 5 until Gold Edition was announced because I played the demo. I couldn't go back to the thumbstick controls after I'd done the whole Wii remote thing. It was just so much more immersive, so much more interactive and intuitive. When Gold Edition came out and they announced PS Move compatibility, I got it like that day. So so for me, it really was about the whole, like, how can you immerse me better? And it didn't require a giant, I think VR is maybe the easy, right? The easy path, right? Like, just slap a screen in front of your eyes and now that's all you see. But if I'm still using a controller with a D-pad in like normal, like Super Mario 1, and Doom, original Doom era,
Uh-huh.
game style, that's only going to go so far. I want that kind of feedback. I want that interaction. You can put me in the game world, but if I constantly have to, exit out of the world to go to a map or go to an inventory screen or something, that kind of pulls me out of the moment and reminds me, oh, you're playing a game, right? Versus in a movie, I've never had a movie stop me and say, wait, go back to the menu and now do the following, and then you can see the rest of the movie, right? They don't they don't do that. So I want to
Yeah.
keep the suspension of disbelief intact throughout the experience.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think that developers are opening up to, there's ways to do that. And so I'm more excited about that actually than I am about VR, but maybe I'm
Yeah, I
alone in
mean,
that.
to answer your curiosity on Wii U
mhm.
real fast. So I guess my perspective on all of this is a little bit different, mainly because to tell you some secret Serenity Forge background, the Wii U is the first console that we started developing for.
Okay.
And there's a reason why none of our games are on the Wii U. We have our Wii U
Okay.
dev kit is still sitting in our office, and we have tried time and time again to use it. And
Gotcha.
instead we have games on the PS4, Xbox One, and fingers crossed, more Nintendo consoles in the future soon,
Mhm.
after this week is over. But we never could do the Wii U. The Wii U is difficult to work with,
Mhm.
not because it's actually hard, not because the hardware is weak, I guess not only because the hardware is weak.
I think I know where you're going with it, but continue.
Yeah, it's hard because only 10% of console gamers play the Wii U, whereas 90% play
Yeah.
the other two.
Yeah.
Um,
So the return on investment is going to be weak, but in some ways, I mean, and at this point in the console's life cycle,
mhm.
it's pretty much given that that's not going to change. I think earlier on in the console's life cycle, there's a little bit of give and take. I know, when you have AAA publishers like EA leaving and Ubisoft leaving and all that other stuff, um, new gamers, right, and gamers that were on the fence are not going to double down on a system that doesn't have the third-party support. Nintendo should have recognized that as a problem very early on and done something to correct it and to incentivize developers remaining with the platform, whether it was better SDKs or better support for the development, or whether it was even in their case like being the publisher for titles where, okay, we'll fund the development, but to publish it costs almost as much to develop it nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you also got to look at it though. Nintendo has no interest in competing with Sony and Microsoft. That's one of the main things that I think most gamers don't see. The people who play Nintendo games don't care about the other two consoles, and the people who play the other two consoles don't care about Nintendo games. There's a very small fraction of people in the mass market, people like us, who actually care about all three consoles, and we watch all the E3 presentations and all that. But the majority of the people who actually pay money for these items are not like us. And I think from Nintendo's perspective, there's no reason why they need third-party support. They have people buying their games. They have launch titles. They have all these things. Especially the Wii U. I mean, they dropped Wii U support 2 years ago. Without even telling anyone. I mean, like, we know this because we were working with them, but they don't care. Like, they told us essentially, stop making your game for the Wii U. We're not even going to support it. Like, just don't even worry about it. And then I mean, I don't know. It's just from Nintendo's perspective. I mean, if you look at their 10K, if you look at their accounting spreadsheets and all that stuff, they can survive 41 years if they stop making money right now. Like that. That's how much cash the company has to experiment and do different things.
Wow.
They don't care to. I mean, the Wii U, I believe, this is just as a fan of the Wii U. I love Nintendo games, but I believe that the Wii U was never supposed to be a console. I believe the Wii U was a test product to test the market and test their capabilities of streamlining their technology to create the Switch. If you look at the Switch, you know immediately that it's not only inspired by the Wii U, but it's the real console that they've been waiting to make. I mean, like, just look at the hardware, look at the polish that they put into that console. You know that the Wii U is a toy in comparison. And Nintendo is not incapable of creating high quality products. They chose not to on purpose to save money, I think. So
I think that those are all both insightful and fair comments. I don't have any I don't have anything to argue, to the contrary on that. I do agree that, Nintendo's always kind of operated in the whole keep some money in reserve, try to do something new, try to do something different. If the audience is there, it'll take off. If not, we'll try again. I mean, Virtual Boy, right? 3DS. A lot of these started off as just kind of a, why are they going with a 3D, handheld, right? That kind of thing. And then, the whole split screen with the DS, right? I mean, that was, I remember when that first came out, a lot of people going, why are there two screens and why is only one of them touch? I don't think that's ever going to work out. Yeah, that was a huge mistake. Right? No, it worked out fantastic for them. It's been the thing that's carried them, I think, through a lot of these other, some would say misfires, but it probably gets back to, what Tom had said a while ago, because a lot of people, he got the same, feedback about the Sega CD as Nintendo's gotten for the Wii U. And when we talked to Tom, Tom's like, Sega CD was never about making money. It was about eventually your ideas are going to become so big and the games are going to become so big that you can't fit it on a ROM. You're going to need something like optical storage or whatever. At the time, that was the only thing, right? They didn't have flash drives with the capacity that we have now. So he knew at some point industry is going to have to go to optical to get the amount of storage space needed to make a truly next-gen game. And we want to be one of the first people to get there. And so we can build a whole new platform and then have all kinds of problems supporting developers and, funding it and sourcing parts, at a premium. Or we could say, like, what's the minimum we'd need to do to make something that we already know, already understand, already can get our arms around, and just add optical technology to it so that we can get around that development hump and figure it out. So basically, Sega CD was a proof of concept, was a test platform for the Sega Saturn. And so he was not ashamed of it. If it broke even, awesome. It was an experiment that the company did. and if it helps secure the base, if a Sega Genesis owner buys a Sega CD and it makes them that much less likely to buy a Super Nintendo, the Sega CD did its job, even if they never get more than 2 games for the Sega CD.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right. I think Nintendo, it's easy to forget that Nintendo's been in the game for a long time. They've gone through a lot of these different cycles, and they certainly have a plan longer than this current fiscal year. So
Yeah.
speaking of which, we got about 5 minutes left, and then we're gonna do a stop. So what I wanted to ask you before we kind of closed up the show, and this kind of dovetails into the whole Nintendo, steers their ship, they know what they're doing. Steam has kind of ruffled some feathers and made some waves with the announcement that that they're going to be retiring Greenlight in favor of a new platform. As a developer, what do you think that means? Do we have people that are saying like doom and gloom, it's the end of gaming as we know it, there's going to be lots of shovelware? Then we got other people saying this is an excellent opportunity for an app store type environment where really, more people can kind of bring their games to the front. What are your thoughts as a developer?
I think well, the truth is, in the long run, none of it really matters, and that eventually there will be other services that will fill the spot. I think that's the main thing. I think the thing that we have to really look at here is not whether or not games are going to be good or bad. Good games are always going to be there. The thing we have to look at is curation. I think curation is the standard to look at. I mean, look at the App Store. I think Steam is bound to become the App Store eventually, right? If Valve knows how to run a business, they want to become the App Store. They have held on so hard for the past decade to gain users as much as they could. They have so many users now that Steam can actually pull stuff like this. Like, imagine if Steam did this 10 years ago or like 5 years ago.
Yeah,
people would stop using it. People would start making new Steam substitutes. I mean, you already have all these things like GOG or Green Man Gaming or Humble bundles even.
Yeah.
There's so many things trying to compete with Steam. But after all these years, now they have so much player retention. People don't leave anymore. And because of that, what's the best next move as a business, of course, is to make it so that 100% of the video game content for PC is on their platform. And I think that's what they're wanting to do. The end result is that two things. I think it really... on the spectrum, I think they said something like $100 to $5,000 per game that you can release, that you have to pay to release a game. Two things could happen depending on this 100 or 5,000 spectrum that they have. If it's very low, then Steam will become an app store, and curation will be moved elsewhere. So, Steam Greenlight still pretends that they're curating games, but it really hasn't for the past 2 years. All these curation groups, no one really, I mean, some hardcore gamers would use them. Most people just look at their Steam algorithm and, buy whatever is on the front page of Steam that's loaded for them. It means that video game YouTubers, streamers, journalists, even, as sad as it sounds sometimes, are going to be more important, more relevant in our industry, which is good. I mean, that's good because they are the content curators who, I mean, people like you guys who are actually skilled in curating content for your users, right?
Yeah.
And your fans will be able to buy games from, your mouth, essentially.
Yeah.
However, if they move the bar to 5,000, like the further they push up that bar, that means less and less lower quality content will be able to make it through. There's probably not going to be a lot of free-to-play games, and even if it's free-to-play, it'll be psychiatric things that's going to trick you into paying as much money as possible kind of games, right? So only big companies are going to be dominating Steam once more. And I don't know. I mean, it's you got to think about like what grassroots game distribution channels are going to start forming again. Humble is probably going to be a lot more busy because of that. People are going to be releasing games on GameJolt or itch.io. All of these smaller like indie platforms. So I think there's always, in terms of change, it really just comes from whatever decision that they make because they're the primary the whole power holders of power, I guess, in some ways. Other people, other services would thrive or become bankrupt essentially based on their decisions.
Excellent. Lizzy, I'm seeing that we're close to time. So Lizzy, do you have any closing questions or?
I heard you're going to be going to some events pretty soon. I think one of them is called Gamer Developers Conference. Can you like give us a little brief of what's that?
Yeah, so the Game Developers Conference next week is in San Francisco. It's pretty much the largest game dev conference. So it's all industry. Usually, I believe it's all just developers there. So not a
Mhm.
lot of press people. Not no like
Like
um,
E3?
no gamers either really there. I mean we're all gamers too, but so it's usually for business. It lasts a week and it's always a good time. I really enjoy it. But we are also going to E3 as well. E3 is more of a press event. I
Awesome.
believe this year they're turning it more into a consumer event as well. I think they opened up consumer tickets for $250 each, which is, if you guys never been to E3 before, you should do this year before they close it down next year because I'm not too sure if it'll stay. So
Wow.
yeah, it's where I'll be, a couple months.
All right.
Awesome.
And in the meantime, people can check out status on Serenity Forge and its current projects at serenityforge.com.
Mhm.
They can also follow you on Twitter.
Yeah. So
So
we have a team Twitter at Serenity Forge or my, full long Chinese name that you can probably post in the links or something like that.
absolutely. So we'll include some links down in the doodly-doo. Z, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Very insightful. Appreciate your open and frank discussion about matters both, industrial and personal. Always good to see. I'm really happy that a lot of developers are kind of taking gaming more seriously, that the literacy is increasing. I'm a big fan of story-driven games and games that kind of try to reach in and grab you in the feels. And so I'm always looking forward to games like that. Especially my wife is also a gamer, and so one of the things that we really enjoy is when one of us can play the game and the other can watch, and then we get to a certain level of completion with the game, and then we just sit down and we talk about what happened, and when it's a game that has a lot of depth, um, and just kind of reaches out and grabs you in an interesting way. Uh, I enjoy the follow up conversations with my wife about the games that we played just as much as I enjoy the games. So for me, that's kind of the sign of a good game, is if the experience persists after I've hit the power button. Um,
Hmm.
so, and I think as a developer too, it's meaningful because those people talking, like you said, the folks like us talking about the game in the break room or talking about the game, with friends or on the show or something. That's what helps to kind of drive adoption, and I think that's how games like Esther go from being like, okay, a couple reviewers, it didn't rub the right way, so they panned it, right? To other folks played it and it really kind of hit home, and then they talk about it, and it kind of turns the tide back. So games that maybe did not get the reception that they should have gotten, have that chance at a second life, so to speak.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, folks, this has been a special delivery of Retro Reload. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Apologize that we couldn't do it live. We had some technical difficulties, but I want to thank Z from Serenity Forge for being on with us. You can find some links to his studio and the games that they make down in the doodly doo. And
Hmm.
Lizzy, thank you so much
Yay,
again for
anytime.
finding these excellent guests. We will see you on Tuesday. Until then, have fun.
Bye bye.